Good afternoon. Welcome to the latest Humpday Hangout. I'm one of your co-hosts, Steve Pegram, Fire Chief in Goshen, Ohio, and President of the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. And it is the first Wednesday of the month, so we're talking training here on the Humpday Hangout. We've got a couple of our hosts and a couple of guests on with us today. We're going to be talking about an article that was recently published in Fire Engineering about training chiefs. But before we go to that, I always like to pass the torch to the editor-in-chief, Bobby Halton. Talk to us a little bit about what's going on with Penwell, Fire Engineering, and FDIC. Bobby?
Hey, well, thank you, Steve. A whole lot of things going on. First and foremost, I'd like to let you folks know that our good friends at Honeywell and DuPont were kind enough to extend the deadline so we can get more folks to put in for the Honeywell Scholarship, which is really, really cool. So please take advantage of that. Downtown hotel space is filling up fast, so please make your reservations and get that taken care of. There's a whole bunch of Airbnbs that are breaking out all over the place, and from what I hear on the news today, you can get a video of your stay after you leave. So they got that going for them. So, you know, take advantage of that and some other things going on. A whole lot of really cool things will be happening at FDIC this year. You know, we've got some amazing classes. Everybody on this call, I think, is speaking. Joe, I don't know. I think everybody is. So, which is really, really cool. We are going to talk about a great article that appeared in Fire Engineering that I read, and I thought, wow, that is some great stuff today. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Fire Rescue had a tremendous December edition, which is out already. Please take a hard look at that. The December Fire Engineering hasn't hit these streets yet, but when you get a chance, I think you're going to enjoy it. Nice tribute to Chief B. So please let me know what you think about that. Got all kinds of really, really cool things going on out there in the big world. The FDSOA just picked up an article by our good friend Matt Blankenship, who wrote about concussions in the fire service. That's a really cool article to read, because one of the pieces of our equipment that really doesn't get a lot of attention, probably should get more attention, is our head protection, right? The helmets weren't made to make us look cool or to, you know, keep water off the back of your collar, although they do all those things. They were meant to protect things from hitting you in the head, right? Like lightweight construction, which is light until it hits you in the head, right? So really cool piece by Matt. Take a look at that. We tweeted that out earlier, and we appreciate all you folks checking in with us. If there's anything we can do for you with FDIC or Fire Engineering, please give me a call. You know, my cell phone number is always out there, but it's 201-406-8278, and I'll answer. So if we can help you, please call us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Aaron.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be back. Sorry I missed last month, but real happy to be back today. For those that don't know me, my name's Aaron Heller. I'm a captain in Hamilton, New Jersey, and been in the fire service for about 34 years now, and still hang out at the volunteer firehouse when I get the chance, because my favorite gym is there, so it's always good to hang out and watch the guys work there. And just real happy to be back this month, and really ramping up for FDIC. I've been on the phone a lot and back and forth with the guys that I'm teaching with, and we're looking forward to making it bigger and better this year. So we're going to move right on. So can't wait to get started. Chief?
If you're following our Humpday Hangout today live, I always forget to mention to make sure that you follow us on Twitter or ask questions on Twitter at hashtag FE, which stands for Fire Engineering Talk. So hashtag FE Talk. If you've got a question, comment, we're always monitoring that, and we will ask the panel. We've got a newcomer with us today that's going to be joining the panel, Joe Pernesti. Joe, go ahead and introduce yourself to us.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Joe Pernesti. I'm with the City of Elyria, Ohio Fire Department, Northern Ohio. Do a lot of articles for Fire Engineering, teaching at this year's FDIC on Monday. Lost in the fog of the fire ground. I'll be Monday morning, and honored and humbled and privileged to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So our guest this month is someone who wrote a really good article in Fire Engineering that came out in November. It's online, and hopefully Penwell can put it up with the Humpday Hangout once this posts in the archives. But the title of it is 10 Things Every New Training Chief Should Know. And the author is Steve Shaw from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Steve, I'll turn it to you and let you just introduce yourself a little bit and a little bit about your background as our guest this month.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for the introduction. My name is Steve Shaw. I'm the Battalion Chief of Training and Special Operations for Fort Lauderdale Fire. And I, too, am just absolutely honored and humbled to be here with you all today. This is definitely a career highlight for me, being with you all, and I'm just proud to represent my department, Fort Lauderdale Fire Rescue. I have 22 years in the fire service, 18 of those with Fort Lauderdale. I've been with the Training Bureau for about 4.5 years, 2 of which is training captain. Got promoted as battalion chief and have been the chief of training for about 2.5 years. And I absolutely love where I work. I love being a Fort Lauderdale fireman, but I absolutely love being in the Training Bureau. I think I've found my calling, and it's, I go to work every day happy. I work with some amazing people. I'm just very happy to be here with you all today.
Awesome. So the article that piqued my interest, the 10 things every new training chief should know, basically lays out 10 different topics that I thought were all very applicable, being a former training chief myself. What I'd like to do is just run through the top 10, let you talk about it a little bit, Steve, and then our other panel members chime in as necessary. And again, if you want to ask a question, hashtag FE Talk, and we'll get that on there to go. But you started off the article with number 1, which is a great number 1 because my deputy chief operations uses this all the time, and that is know your job. You want to expand on that a little bit for us, Chief?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of these things I basically I kind of wrote this article in one night after having a moment of inspiration. I was lying next to my wife and I jotted all these things down. But a lot of this was from reflection during my time in training. And one thing I think I didn't do when I first started is I didn't take enough time to really understand everything I needed to know as the training chief. I'd been a training captain, so I had at least a little bit of groundwork that I knew what needed to be done for the most part on that level, but not as a chief. And I think I let myself get caught up with what we were doing and trying to do so much that I never established my base. And in retrospect, I really wish I would have just dedicated the time to reach out to the former training chief, reach out to my boss more, reach out to other training chiefs in the area to really just establish everything I needed to know going forward. And I think that would have saved me time later on. My boss, when he first came to be my boss a year ago, he actually did something I was impressed with. He told me, Steve, keep doing what you're doing. I need a little time to figure out what I'm doing. So call me if you need me, but give me about 3 to 6 months and then we'll go full bore. And I thought that was just very a great way to start. And him telling me that, there was no ambiguity. I knew he was taking the time to understand his position. And I kind of wish I would have done that better. And I think that it would have saved me time that could have otherwise been spent doing program development, mentoring, and so on and so forth.
Very good. Number 2 on your list is prioritize. Talk to me a little bit about prioritization as a training boss.
Well, hey, can we talk about number 1 first?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because I think that's so Steve, when you were talking about understanding your job, right? And you said you were a training captain before that?
Yes, sir.
So when did your boss, when you were a training chief, sit down with you and say, hey, this is what a training captain ought to do, or were you just kind of promoted, handed you bars, and told to show up at the academy?
Kind of a combination of the two. My previous boss was excellent. He never micromanaged us. He let us kind of run with the not only what we were doing, but with our special projects that we'd like to take on. And I guess just being so busy, there was no real time to kind of watch my boss and mentor under him as much as I would have liked to have done. And then when the transition took place, when he was returning to shift and I was taking his position, there was just no time, for a variety of different reasons, for me to sit down and just absorb what he had been through, what his expectations were and such. And like I said, in retrospect, I wish I would have just grabbed him by his arms, put him down for a second, and just listen, let's just talk and go through exactly what you've been through, what your experiences were, what worked, what didn't work. Who do you know here? Who do you know there? Who do I need to reach out to? Because I would have said maybe the first year just getting to know the people that I should have known from day one. And nobody's fault, and I take the responsibility of that for myself. But like I said, I guess we're so busy, and we kept being busy, that I just kept handling the fires that were continuing to be, no pun intended, the fires that were needed to be putting out, taking care of the promotional tests, taking care of the training. And I should have just delegated better. I should have spend the time understanding my job instead of just working on what we were currently doing.
Yeah, and I think
so.
Those are some great points. But I think that I don't care where you're working or what you're doing in the fire department or anyplace else. The day-to-day is what consumes us, right? And I always love, one of my favorite old Chief Brunacini lines was he used to say all the time, long-range planning in the Phoenix Fire Department was lunch, because, and that was at 8 o'clock in the morning, right? So, which makes sense, because we're all reactionary. I don't care where you're working, whether you're a volunteer firefighter and you're thinking about your plumbing business or your auto body shop or whatever you're doing, you got to deal with the business that comes in that day. But I think what's cool about having a cat like you make it to training chief is that you were a training captain. So you already kind of know what's expected of your people and what they're going through, which is a quote from my son, who's a training officer for the Navy. And that's the key, right? The key to being a good training chief, I think, is having been a good firefighter, a good company officer, a good engineer, then a good training officer, and coming up to, right? Like so often people get thrown into training who had no connection to training before. The formal side of it. I think every firefighter is a trainer, but the formal side of it. So what you said to me was like absolutely perfect. And if you're a chief out there looking for your next cat to put into the chief of training slot, if you're the FD chief, the CFD, look to your cadre of captains or lieutenants or whatever, your officers that are currently in your training academy, because they know what's expected of them, and they know what it's like to try to deal with the scheduling and the exceptions and the cancellations and the, and I don't envy you guys, because now the way stuff's moving. When I was a young firefighter, we used to do airway. Now I found out that air doesn't matter anymore. Just do CPR, because people don't need to breathe anymore. So all you need to do is compressions, because apparently, I'm just kidding. But I mean,
I will say one more thing.
It's changing so fast, right?
I will say one more thing, Chief. The one thing that I've noticed and I've talked to a bunch of the training folk out there since I took over, and I got to tell you, there is at least the vast majority of people that I've talked to will say the same thing. There was no plan. There was no succession planning when I came in. And I hear that all over the place. There was no plan. I got here, I took over. Okay, what do I do now? And I hear that from so many people. I'm just kind of surprised by it. And, it happened to me in a variety of ways. And I will tell you, right now, I've got a series of books and manuals and binders up there. So when someone takes over for me, their transition will not be as hard. And I take pride in that, because I want to make sure that my department is set up for success that way. And I take a lot of pride in the succession plan that I'm setting up right now for the next person to take over for me.
Write that down, put it in an envelope, put it inside your desk, so when the next guy gets there, he can have a good laugh.
Steve, what you're talking about and going into the training division is awesome. Like Bobby said, I think because we've heard so many times, even on this Humpday Hangout and talking to people, there's still a lot of places where the people assigned to training, it's a punishment. Or, they didn't know where else to put them, so they stuck them in training. And that obviously, for a lot of reasons, creates a lot of issues in an organization and doesn't help the person or the organization. So it sounds like you're above the curve on that. Anybody else want to comment on number one, know your job, before we go to prioritization?
Well, yeah, real quick. I think one of the things that the Chief hit on that's really important is, number one, he wanted to be there, but he did his time in the street. And when you add up the numbers, he did a long time in the street. And that's key, because I've seen a lot of chiefs in our region here in the Northeast that, to make chief side of it, they took the training path quite purposely. They weren't into training. They weren't into the job, but they saw that the career advancement was there. And so they jumped the training side, very similar to guys jumping the prevention side, get promoted, and then they can move back and forth. So a guy who's into it, somebody who really wants it and knows the job from the street, immediately garners respect from the firefighters that are going to be under him and the captains under him. And I think there's a very important point there, that if we get away from that, it tends to fall apart no matter how good a planner you are and no matter how good you are at laying out curriculum. Without that street credential, it does become a problem down the road. So it falls to the credibility issue that we've discussed for years.
Not only that, you also need to know, in my opinion, where to go to get information. You may have all the street cred and have that experience, but one thing as a training officer, if you don't know the answer or don't have the training curriculum, you need to know where to go to get that. And the more resources you have outside of your organization, in my opinion, the better off you are. There's so much out there that you can access, and don't keep it just secluded to your own department. I think that's a mistake a lot of departments do.
Totally agree.
Yep. All right, number 2 on your list, Steve, was prioritize, and you talk about what you have to do versus what you want to do. I think that's a great start.
When I first started as in training, it was made very clear to me, and it keeps getting reinforced to me. In fact, yesterday I had a conversation with my boss who reinforced to me one more time. Just remember, Steve. And I'm like, I know. There's what I have to do and what I would like to do. And I think some people break it down even further. The have tos, the should dos, the like tos. But at the end of the day, at least in my experience, it's what you have to do and what would you like to do. And for us, like in Fort Lauderdale, for example, and a lot of the South Florida departments, because most of us are paramedics, a lot of what we have to do is medical training. We run 70 to 80% medical calls. It's a bulk of what we do. So we have to maintain that paramedic and that EMT certification. If we do not, and if we lose that certification for that person's not going to have a job anymore. So that becomes a have to. We have to do that. Unfortunately, some of the things that that I think we all consider, yeah, we have to do this. It's almost a matter of perception. Some people don't see it the same way as we do. We may say, I have to do RIT training. I have to do this. I have to do that. And somebody's like, I don't think you have to do that. So it's sometimes up for perception or up for debate. But I think that it's important, and this is what I've tried to do over the past couple of years, is get really good at what you have to do when it comes to your have-tos. If you've got your have-tos down to a science, and you can find ways to make them efficient, save time doing them, automate certain things, delegate other things, you're creating more time for the things you would like to do. And for example, for me, we focused last year on heavily, 2016 on hands-on training when I started as chief. And I made it a point to make it a have-to, but only after I made sure the other stuff was taken care of. I had the EMS stuff down pat. We had all our priorities taken care of, and then just had the time to dedicate to the stuff that we really wanted to do, between RIT training, acquired structures, live burns, and such. Because, at least, again, back into my experience, when time is a factor, and when you have only so much of a pie to split, and the budget starts becoming an issue, things that get cut are those like tos. Mm-hmm. So it keeps seeming to come up from my bosses and everybody around me. And I keep reminding my boss that I'm definitely focusing on my have-tos, but I'm going to try to get as much of my like-tos in there as much as possible.
Steve, when you talk about have-tos, I mean, I'm sure a lot of it is state-mandated, certification type stuff. Do you tend to use different types of training to accomplish that? And what I mean by that is, are you utilizing like online learning, computer-based learning, things like that, to kind of check the box, if you will, versus actual hands-on practical training or lecture with an instructor?
Okay, so we're going there. Okay, so here's what I got to say about that, and I've talked to my department and my crew, my training crew. Yeah, we do have a learning management system to tackle a lot of our online training, and my biggest when I talk about training, I always preach that the backbone of any training organization should be hands-on training, supported by online and all the other stuff. I have no problem with online training. I think it's a definite, if done right, there's a definite advantage for it. I think it's efficient, it saves time, but it should not be the backbone of any training organization or any training program. That's a mistake. It should be supportive of the hands-on training. And that's what I try to make sure that we do in our department, where we set up the hands-on training and everything else, videos and tests and lessons learned is supportive of that. But yes, we do use the online training for a variety of things, from EMS CEUs to lessons learned to some of our officer and driver training, combined with a little bit of hands-on. So it's a very careful marriage between the two. I always will be the proponent of a firm, robust, hands-on training program as your skeleton, supported by everything else.
Awesome. I didn't know how you were going to answer that question, but you answered it correctly. Guys, anything else on prioritization? How do you guys use it?
Yeah, you know, prioritization is big because you can get lost in the fog really quickly, especially as a new training boss, like Steve said, because you're being hit from so many different angles, and you've got a lot of guys that want certain things, and they may not be the priority of the job, but they're the priority of that individual or that platoon. So you're trying to manage all of that at once, and if you can organize yourself and put it into priorities and understand what the departmental needs and the regional needs are, it's going to make it a little easier for you to proceed. If it's haphazard and it's just, you know, we need CPR now, but we need, you know, AED training in 3 months, and one gets pushed off to the side, you know, or we're forgetting about nozzle work and we're going right into nothing but, you know, RIT, survival, and hazmat, well, we've got to find a way to blend it. And so prioritization is key, especially for that newer person in the position who's just trying to get your feet wet.
I'd like to ask, what is the hardest rank in Fort Lauderdale to prepare training or internal training? Is it the battalion chief, the captain, lieutenant? Just kind of curious. In my department, to me, it's the captain, because to fill in for the ship commander. And that, to me, in my department, is probably the hardest one as far as getting that initial training. Just kind of curious what he thinks in a larger organization.
That's an excellent question. And so basically you're saying which is the hardest position to train, or is that what your question is? What's the hardest
position to organize and train as far as prioritizing training?
I got you.
To me, it's the battalion chief or the captain, because that person has been a company officer. Now he has to fill in for the shift commander, or, you know, ride up, and that can be a whole new ball game. So I was just kind of curious where you prioritize your training as far as new officers, and what rank and how.
Yes, sir. I will tell you that I had multiple conversations over the last few months between my deputy chief of operations, between the training and education subcommittee for the whole Broward County area internally, and everybody says the same thing. We should be focusing on officer development. Officer development, officer development. It is the one thing I hear over and over again. We did some officer development training last year. We're planning some this year coming up. And in my personal opinion, the company officer is the most influential person at the station level. The most influential person, not the fire chief, not the union president, not me. That company officer has the most ability to influence people at their station. So in my opinion, the company officer training is probably, if I had to rank things, I don't want to, maybe I'm getting myself into trouble here, but that might be the most important training, because they set the pace at their station. They're transmitting the information that we want from the training bureau to the crews in the field. They're what makes it tick. We value our company officer training. We're putting ours together right now for 2018. I think that's maybe the most important training we do, because they set the bar. They're there to, like I said, disseminate information and stuff. And that's not to negate that anything else is that important. I mean, your battalion chief level training, driver training, recruit training, it all is important. But I just have this firm belief that the company officer is the most influential piece of the puzzle. So you have to cater to those individuals and give them the training they deserve.
Awesome.
I hope that answered your question.
I think it's good.
Yeah, I think when you talk about prioritizing, when you think about, especially for a training chief in a department like Fort Lauderdale, which is a really dynamic, complex organization, you got so many balls in the air, because the training is so important at every level, right? Whether it's the recruit firefighters, whether it's the senior assistant chiefs who may have to learn how to do, you know, advanced budgeting or public speaking or whatever it is, because they're projecting an image to the public. I mean, when you talk about prioritizing training, that's a wickedly complex problem, because then you get down into the nuance of what part of company officer training and what part of recruit training and what part of, chief level training, what part of, and we're a training group, right? The instructor society, fire engineer, training is our lives. But what's fascinating about it is that no matter what happens in an organization, I don't care. Anything happens, well, that's a training issue.
It's true.
So there's always that, okay, now we've got to teach people how to properly fold envelopes, so that no one gets a paper cut, right? Because somebody got a paper cut and there was a $5,000 lawsuit, and now it's the paper cut initiative, or which prop up, and we've all been through them, right? I mean, we've all been through those, we've got to do this now training because, somebody thought it was a good idea to bring an octopus to the bunk room one night with them or whatever. So, trying to make it as bizarre as possible. So hopefully that's never happened in Fort Lauderdale, but I could be completely off base. But I mean, I think it's neat that you listed prioritization as the second thing, because somebody's got to make that call, and it's the training chief, and that's a big call.
Yes, sir.
That's
yes,
a big call.
And everybody seems to have their own idea of what priorities should be.
Right.
So it's definitely a collaboration. It's definitely relevant, recent calls, our needs in the city. For example, we have tons of high rises going up right now. If you look around the city Fort Lauderdale skyline, multifamily dwellings replacing single one-story CBS constructed homes. So that gives us for me, that means I got to start planning to do high-rise training. But there's other priorities. There's medical evaluations. There's, the SWAT training. There's just so much to do, and balancing that and trying to fit it on such a busy calendar with our call volume it's always going to be the hardest thing, is just getting that balance down. But that's when priorities do kick in. What's the most important thing we have to do right now?
Brilliant article, man. Keep going. Beautiful stuff, Steve.
Number 3 on your list was track everything. I think you talked about it a little bit, those binders that you have started to keep. But talk about that real quick for us.
Yeah, so this is more of just a personal thing. After about being in training for a couple of years, we were just so busy, we didn't have time to write things down or put things away and kind of keep track of things. I just realized as I was preparing for my battalion chief's test, I started putting things together, and I'm like, man, we did a lot in training. I mean, just from public demonstrations to multiple classes to bringing speakers in. And when I started compiling it all, I'm like, man, there's a lot of stuff we were involved with. And I forgot a lot of the stuff that we were involved with, ironically. So I make it a point now to try to just at least keep track of all that. But more importantly is tracking everything for the people in your bureau, the people that are coming into your bureau, that have questions about your bureau from other places in the city, just what you've done, how you've done it, what worked, what didn't work. Otherwise, you get so caught up in everything, you're going to forget something. You're going to not be able to pass on something. And it just, I don't know. When I took over as hazmat coordinator, for example, I found that after a few years, a lot of the knowledge that was there when the team first started back in '79 had been just bits and pieces have been lost over time. Nobody's fault, just for whatever reason, it been lost. I guess my goal is just to not lose any information, to make that transfer as easy as possible for the next people coming in, to make sure that we have more time to focus on other things other than finding out why we're doing something. So it's just a kind of a personal reflection. I didn't want to forget things as they went along.
Awesome. Yeah, make a list. I always keep a list of what we're working on, what we're getting ready to do, because you get busy and you forget to write stuff down.
And I think it's a great point, not only for institutional knowledge, to document, and I was kind of goofing around, but this will be appearing in our January edition, and it's our good friends from Target Solutions who have a ISO training tracker. So for compliance issues, right? If it's not written down, it didn't happen. And whether it's ISO or whether it's an investigation after an injury or an exposure issue to one of our firefighters, and Target Solutions are great people, and there's other folks that have tracking instruments out there, commercial stuff, and I support all of them. The reason I thought it was interesting is this literally was on my desk. I was doing the final proof for it for the January edition. And I liked the piece, so I hung on to it because it is a complicated process, and that's a training record, and people wouldn't realize that, but the operations folks in the community are counting on the training chief to maintain those records in order to get those insurance ratings, in order to track those exposures, in order to, you know, reach those milestones that we need to in order to fulfill our fiduciary responsibility to the people we really work for, the citizens of Fort Lauderdale, in Steve's case. And so I think that to have that as your third bullet point was huge in terms of the institution of the Fort Lauderdale Fire Department, but also to the community. I think it's one of those bifurcated issues that are, both sides are equally important, and outstanding that was the third bullet.
Sure.
Yeah, that takes us right into number 4, which is data is king, which I know if Chief Roden was on here with us today, he would love that topic.
He's listening. He's on duty. He's listening.
But I'll be honest with you. I mean, my experience has been, I've seen it places I visit and places I've worked, that in general, the law enforcement community does much better job at this than we do. And when we complain that the police department's budget's bigger than the fire department's budget, I think a lot of it goes back to data. So talk to us a little bit about data, Steve.
Well, yeah, the number 3 definitely ties into number 4. I think that we're well past the time where we can just stand in front of our bosses and slam our hands on the table and say, I want this, I want this. Maybe that would have worked before. It's not happening today, and especially in my neck of the woods where we're accredited, we're ISO 1. They don't want to hear me begging for things. They want me to prove the need for it, whether it's through quantitative or qualitative analysis or multiple calls run on a certain thing that requires us to have this piece of equipment. Other than that, they don't want to hear things from me. So it's funny. One of my former training captains, Mark, he had his MBA, and I'm thinking, you know, when I was kind of naive back in the day, I'm thinking, well, that's kind of a stupid degree for the fire service. But I gotta tell you, what we've done over the past few years is when we want something, we put together business proposals for it. We put together formalized statements with all the data in there that shows you why we need something, with the goal of, hey, here's the presentation, here's what we need, yes or no. And we don't want to go back and forth. But our bosses now, they don't want to hear anything. They don't want to hear other than something that's data focused. And it's a good and a bad thing, I suppose. But it's the truth now, whether you like it or not. You just aren't. And if you are an organization that you can't keep screaming and yelling and, you know, get you things, great, good for you. I don't have that luxury anymore. So we work very well with our city trying to figure out where the highest call volume is, when our busiest times of day are, what kind of calls we're running. Do we need additional personnel or equipment? You know, in Fort Lauderdale, it works to our benefit a lot of times. You know, we're ranked as one of the busiest fire departments in the country. Imagine that, Fort Lauderdale. We have some of the busiest rescues and engines in the country. And 2 years ago, that was bragging rights. It was like, yeah, we're the busiest. Yeah, it's awesome. I got to tell you, it's not bragging rights anymore. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But those high call volumes with our rescues, our medical rescues, and our engines running so many calls that are documentable and provable to the city commissions and such, it makes it easy for them. Oh, you guys are too busy, thus you need more people. And we're benefiting from that right now. We just run multiple new hire classes through, multiple rookies now on the street we're training. So there's a lot of advantages to having the data. You have to know where to get it, how to use it. But it's just the fact of life now that we're not in that world anymore. You can't beg and plead. You have to prove your case. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that's with data.
Yeah, the first thing I think of is knowing your audience too. And you spoke to it a little bit, but if the people, elected officials or whoever it is that approve, for example, budgeting, hiring, anything like that, replacing equipment, if they have a certain business background or, like you said, an MBA, or they own a company, or I had one of my bosses was a banker, so you couldn't BS them on borrowing money and you know, taking out a bond or purchasing things. But it's knowing that audience and knowing how to speak to that audience. And their expectation is we, as public servants, especially in management, are going to present to them the same as their managers, department heads do at their workplace. So it's understanding that, and I think all of us have struggled with that. Any of you other guys, anything you're doing with big data for your organizations?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same as you're discussing. I can tell you, I just took the New Jersey Civil Service test for fire chief, and it's simply a 4-question oral exam, and that is the fire chief exam, and it's a long, drawn out 4-question process. But one of the key points of the 4 was budgeting and presentation. and they hammer you on key points of that, because in today's world, you can't, as you said, you can't just BS your way through it. Not many of us are going to get away with the Tommy Brennan theory of, well, do you know what a firefighter's death cost the city? And, you know, and just give them a number and they go, yeah, okay, chief, you got me. They're not going to go for that in a lot of places anymore. And I love that story. When Tom told that story, I thought, man, that is perfect for what I've seen in our area. But now there's not that. So data is the king. And there's so many different systems and so many different things we can track and how we can track it. And again, use those numbers to our benefit, because those who are opposed to us are going to try to use those numbers to our detriment. So we have to understand how to do it. And by tracking it and by having our ducks in a row, it's more difficult for the others to take a piece of our pie.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Well, number 5 is how thick is your skin? And I think that might be a Hump Day Hangout all in itself. But the first thing I saw in number 5, talking about how thick is your skin, was understanding the difference between a friendship and leadership. You want to talk a little bit about number 5 for us?
Well, yeah, without, like you said, going into a significant tangent here, yeah. You know, being in the training bureau, delivering training, keeping track of that, records from the top down, from your certifications to your CPR cards, all that jazz. It's daunting. It's filled with legal ramifications if things aren't done right. So, and I imagine there's departments out there that have found themselves in sticky situations, quagmires, whatever you want to call them, where maybe documents were kept in line as much as they should have, or whatever. But we have as training folk, we have a significant responsibility to our department to make sure our records and the way we do things meets a certain criteria. Well and beyond that, that's stored in a certain way. If there's rules and regulations saying you have to do something with your tracking and your housing of your records, your files, you got to do that. And our bureau is responsible for that. So if I need certain things done prior to you coming to a class, I need you to have those things done. If there's pre-course material, if there's prerequisites, whatever, you got to be there. If the class is from 8 to 5, and I need you from there to 8 to 5. And, you know, I guess my advantage is I don't mind being the jerk. I don't mind being that guy. God gave me a big back for a reason. If they want to throw daggers, I got a big surface area back there. That's fine. But it takes somebody to just let people know and be upfront. Like, listen, this is the way we're going to do this. It's for the right reasons. You're going to get good training, but we have to do this the right way. I think that it's not the big ticket items a lot of the time that will get you in trouble. Though they will, but a lot of times your own folk won't pull those big ticket items on you. It's sometimes the little things that start to build up. If, for example, if you've set a standard in your bureau where you're going to accept, you're not going to let somebody in class unless they have this done. And you're going to have those people, come on, we're the fire department. You're going to have those people that are going to come into class going, hey, man, listen, bro, you know, I had a late last night. I had a late call. I didn't know this till this morning I was going to do this, so I didn't get this done. Listen, the moment you say, yeah, I'll let that slide. The moment you say that, you're going down a rabbit hole. You're starting it off wrong, yep. And your crew's going to see that. That guy is going to know. I remember once a few years back, I was starting a class in the morning, and at the time, one of our senior chief officers was in the class. He's no longer with us. He moved on to another department, but he came into class without having the pre-course material for the class. And I'm about to start the class, and I'm collecting all the pre-course material, and this gentleman didn't have it. So it was funny because everybody, my crew, the people in the class looked right at me, and they're like, what is he going to do? So long story short, I ended up speaking with the chief, who was a great guy. And luckily, he came to me afterward and said, you know, listen, I realized I didn't bring it. I'll come back next shift. Thank God. But someone's got to be there to enforce the rules. And, you know, I think that, like I said, if you start going down the wrong path, if you start letting things slip, it's only going to get worse and worse and worse. By establishing a standard and sticking by that standard, and everybody knowing you sticking by that standard, it becomes the norm. But you're going to have those people that push, and you got to have a ready response for it. You got to have it ready to go when you are pushed, because it's going to happen. But as long as you're transparent, you're clear, there's no gray areas, then you're set up for success. But you're not going to have people that like that, and they're going to talk, and they're going to make fun of you, and they're going to be like, oh, that guy's a jerk. It is what it is. But overall, I think there's a lot more benefit than that than negative. And at the end of the day, we are protecting our department from large-scale disasters by protecting all these little things and going from there. So I'm sorry I drug that out a little bit, but
no, that's fine. Any of the chiefs, captains on the board want to chime in on that? I'm sure we've all got experience with having to have thick skin.
Well, if I could, one thing that I would say to a new training or a training chief or training officer that may not have a lot of rank, a lot of times in departments like mine, you have to tell a chief officer that they may have not done the right thing at a call, or that they need some additional training in something, or new techniques, and that can be very difficult to do.
Yep.
Especially when everybody knows your career coming up through the ranks and so on. So that's where I see the thick skin has to really come into play, is when you have to tell somebody that you have grown on the job with in the same department that they need to look at things a different way. And I think maybe that's where one advantage is with departments that bring in outside training officers.
I think that's a great point, Joe. And I know I've spoken to and even experienced previous in my career that in a lot of organizations, the rank of the training officer is lower than the rank of a lot of the people they're dealing with day to day on scheduling and stuff like that. So the training officer may say, hey, we're doing this at 1 o'clock today. And the battalion chief or deputy chief or whatever the rank is in the organization may say, no, we're not. Yeah. And that gets pretty interesting and a little bit dicey. And I've actually talked to training officers who had all the right motivation and enthusiasm and knowledge, skills, and abilities, but couldn't get over that issue, if you will, of rank within the organization. And I think that's just an example for people like myself who hold the chief's position, is making sure you support that training officer so that yes, they may not outrank everybody that they supervise and are required to maintain training for, but when we're talking training, they're kind of the stop. Everything ends with them. And right. That's a leadership issue, I think, that some of us are challenged with.
I think that becomes a bigger issue in small departments.
Yeah.
I've seen it where I hold the rank of a captain, yet I'm in charge of training and making the schedule up and making sure everybody's doing it and getting all their props squared away. And but it's a respect issue, and it is an issue. But in smaller departments, it's more difficult, I think, because we've all grown up together. As Steve said, we've all come up the ranks together. So it is a little bit different, but it makes total sense. And having thick skin, if you don't have thick skin in this business, get out, because you're gonna go gray faster than Bobby.
It's gonna get worse.
Gray together.
I think it's a great comment to say. I think it's important to let people know that you're going to be more exposed.
Yeah.
There's the old Army adage. Once you put on the bars, if you want friends, get a dog. That's because once you become a company officer, once you become once you take rank, that's just it. You're not going to be popular anymore if you do the job correctly, and if you do exactly what Steve just said, hold people accountable to standards that are critical to the effective functioning and the good order and discipline of the unit. Right? I mean, I watched my kid go through it in his career. I've gone through it, and we can say have a thick skin and all that good stuff. But I think I'm speaking for everybody on this panel. I think I'm speaking for everybody in the fire service. You can do a class for 599 people, and one of them, the 600th person, says, "You stink, I hate you, you should never teach again." For 6 months, you lie awake at night, upset about that one person, who is probably your wife or your best friend or, somebody who actually knows you. And, I'm just kidding. But, I mean, we're all sensitive people. We all care deeply about what other people think of us. I always hear people say, I don't care what people think of me. Yeah. You're either a very ugly person or you're lying. because we all care. I mean, at least I know I do. I mean, we care deeply, and it's tough, and it's gotten worse. I mean, you know, nowadays a guy like Steve was the chief of training. Not only do you have to worry about, you know, what you hear from the scuttlebutt and the coffee table stuff, but it's what folks put on the Twitterverse and the Instagram verse and the whatever verse that people are, you know, anonymously and without repercussions doing, you know, and it's fascinating because people without responsibility or accountability are very quick to throw stones at those who have it. And, you know, the old line out of Shakespeare, and I think if you're gonna recommend books to anybody, start with Shakespeare. But he said, heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? And if you're wearing the crown of the training officer, that's a heavy load, and people are going to throw stones. Why do we have to do wildland training or car fires again? I've been on the job for 30 years. Why do I got to go through a car fire class? Okay, well, the guy sitting in the class with you hasn't been on the job 35 years, and by the way, cars have changed since 1972. So, you know, but I get it, and I've gone through it, and Steve is going through it, and Aaron's going through it, and it's easy to say have a tough skin, but I think the best part about having the best thing I would say is have a tough skin, but have somebody you can call and say, man, why are they beating me up so bad? And it probably needs to be another training chief who can say, or the instructor society is the perfect group. I mean, join the instructor society, which we should say every show, and I apologize we haven't said it yet, but join the instructor society so you can reach out to a guy like Joe or Aaron or Steve or you know, and say, man, they're beating the crap out of me, you know, and say, dude, let me tell you about getting beat up.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
You ain't seen nothing yet. Wait till the chief of the department shows up without the prerequisite stuff and demands to sit through the class. There's a big day.
Well, Bobby, your timing is perfect. I don't know if you're reading off the cheat sheet, but the next topic in the article was making sure you network every day.
Wow, I didn't. I swear to goodness, I didn't.
And so I think that goes right into that conversation. Steve, mention a little bit what you were thinking about with that, but it really hits exactly what Bobby was just saying.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I'll give you my favorite example of this. When I was first getting into training as a captain, for whatever reason, I like to use saws and I like to cut garage doors. I don't know why. Everybody's got their thing. We have some interesting garage doors down here in South Florida that are hurricane reinforced. I believe Captain Gustin's wrote a bunch of articles on them. We do a lot of training with it down here. And I wanted to make that like a monthly PO. So I went to a local garage door company just to get some information. I'm like, hey, listen, you know, can you show me the construction? Can you walk me through what you think is the best way to do this? I'm thinking about building a prop. And the guy at the place was like, well, what are you thinking about building? And I showed him my design, and he goes, well, that's a crappy design. I'm like, oh, thanks. He goes, let me build one for you. I'm like, okay. Long story short, this company built us a large wooden 6x6 prop, which you could put 2 doors on either side for training and enforceable entry on garage doors. And it's no cost to them except for the wood because the doors they have are trash. They're going to throw them away anyway. So basically, when we go out there and train, we make their trash smaller to go inside a dumpster. Right. It's benefit. But reaching out to that person in the beginning was just, I don't know, the goal, because we train with this company on a regular basis, cutting up garage doors. Everybody gets forcible entry training, saw training, tactics trainings on L-shape and barn door cuts and all that stuff. But it's just my favorite example because it's a continued relationship. We help them out, they help them out. It's beautiful. But I think that what I was trying to get at with this point was questions. You know, get out there and don't network to be the guy that's just trying to network, you know, but get out there and ask questions. Try to learn what other people have done before you to see if you're doing things right. Ask opinions and such. And I've done that not only on the fire side, but internally in the city, like our IT department, our public works department. And, you know, even with IT, getting so close with them, every so often, hey, Steve, we have all these extra computers. Do you have a need for them? Yes, we do. Hey, Steve, we have this learning management system that we're no longer going to use anymore. Would you like to use it? Absolutely. And so these are the things that not only is it great to meet these people, interact, benefit for both parties on either end. You know, public works is huge. Hey, Steve, we're about to demo a building. Would you like to tear it up before we chop it down? Yes, thank God. It's like Disney World for us. Yes. Random hospitals. Hey, Steve, I got excess hazmat equipment that I'm going to throw away that's expired. Do you want it? Yes. Yeah, everything. So a lot of this is a lot of physical stuff, but there's more to it than that as well. A lot of the knowledge sharing is huge. I mentioned before, I work with the training group for Broward County, and the things I've learned from the other training chiefs in my area, oh my gosh, these guys are wealths of knowledge. And it doesn't matter if you're with a small one-station department or a massive county department, everybody's got something to share. And I love training with those guys. I love going to these meetings because sharing of knowledge and everybody benefits. So I'm just proud to be part of that. And I find myself trying to give back to the people that have shared so much of me as much as I possibly can. I'll go teach in an officer development class. I'll go to someone's station or bring the garage door prop. That sharing is just, it's essential. Not only on the fire side, but just overall.
Yeah,
So
that's
sorry
awesome.
to go off on a tangent like that.
No, it's great because you were talking about networking inside the community, which I think is huge. And I think it's by the way, it's a great article. And I know a guy who's got a magazine and love to print it about coming across the prop. But networking within your community, networking within the community of instructors, networking within other chiefs, with other departments, that is a really great point. And real quick anecdotal story, I had a similar deal when I took over as chief of training. My first round as chief of training in Albuquerque, I went out to a Arby's restaurant to look at a girder truss, right? They were building it. And I said to the guy, I said, well, if this place was on fire and there was flame impingement on the truss, and he was a really nice guy up to that point. I said, what should I tell my troops? And the guy looks at me and he says, son, if this building's on fire, what the hell would you be doing in here? And I said, well, I was wearing my Japanese admiral costume like Chief Pegram has on. And I said, well, we're the fire department. And he said, there's nothing in this building worth your lives. Don't bother coming in here. We'll bulldoze it and I'll rebuild one in 45 days.
Yep.
And I was like, and he looked at me like I came in on a small bus, and I was like puffing my chest up like, oh, well, mister, I was like, I did my whole, and then so the best part of the story, a couple of weeks later, I'm doing the class for the guys, right, to train the trainer for my instructors, and I said, and just remember, there's nothing worth the life of a firefighter inside of a damn Arby's. I'm quoting the guy who dressed me down. Oh God, I love it. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. I think those are great points, and all of us could tell a networking story and how the relationships and networking that we have and we've done, whether it be through the magazine or FDIC or through the Instructor Society, has helped us in our careers. And it's just having those contacts and those people to reach out to. I will give a shameless plug to ISFSI, and for those of you that are members, hopefully you're utilizing our online members section. And if you're not, make sure you get into that. And if you're not a member, we encourage you to join and get involved. But it allows you to search for instructors by topic. So every person that's in our database can say what their personal interests are or areas that they teach. So for Steve Shaw, for example, he might be known as the garage door guy. And Joe is known as, the Main Street guy. You got to fire on Main Street. But it's cool because if you're looking for an expert or you're looking for somebody from a networking standpoint, we have that resource and that search engine to identify those instructors for you. So number 7 is take care of your staff, and that's one that I really like. Talk to us about taking care of your staff in the training bureau, Steve.
Well, I've had the pleasure over the last 4.5 years to work with some absolutely amazing talent. I mean, just far better than when I became chief. These guys just were far out doing what I could do in the bureau, and they're just amazing. But with training comes not only a lot of responsibility, but you get burnt out real quick with all the stuff that's laid on your shoulders. So not only do you have all this work to do from EMS, fire, special ops training, things that come last minute, rookie training, promotional testing, everything. It's hard. It's burning. It's not burning the candle at both ends. It's taking the candle and throwing it in the oven and turning it on, high heat. Burnt out really, really quickly. So doing your best to just monitor your folk, find out what makes them tick. Little things as simple as knowing what their cup of coffee is, how they take their coffee. Do they little just gifts here and there. A pat in the back goes so far. Just letting them know how good they're doing. Calling their other people that they work with and telling them, hey, listen, this guy's amazing. So that travels back to them. It's just giving credit where credit's due. We get beat up pretty good in our training bureau, but it's never been more cohesive in a long time. And it's partly because it's so busy, we don't have time to complain a lot. But the other thing is just everybody's just, we're motivated. We have good people that work with us. You can't get so caught up with what's being done that you don't watch your staff. And that's the same as you're watching the people at your station. Internally, are they having any issues? Are they having any problems? Do you need to chat with them? Whether it's critiquing or just to give them, like I said, that pat in the back. But that staff is going to make or break you. So you got to take care of your staff as best you can. I can't say more simply than that.
Yep, I think we probably all could do better at that, regardless of our rank or where we are in the organization, taking care of each other.
Yes, sir.
I'm very curious about this next one. It says, get outside and don't grow roots. And I think some of us have a tendency to grow roots. So let's talk about that for a second.
Well, when I started getting into my office, I kind of liked it. I kind of liked the administrative work, weirdly. But I started to know, I guess I did what I thought was right. I waited to take a battalion chief's test for a long time to get some experience in the field. And I feel that kind of gave me a little bit more going into being the chief. But you can easily get caught up with that administrative stuff and just get, grow roots in your desk. I have a busy training bureau, busy people running around doing all kinds of training. I try to get out there and train with them. This last Monday, we were throwing ladders all day. We had a great day. But these guys need to see the training chief and the training folk out there doing things. I can't sit in my office and be known as the office guy all day. I got to be out there doing stuff as well. I got to maintain my knowledge. I got to continue to be a student of the fire service. I got to make sure I know what they're teaching so I can either teach it as well or fill in for them if they're not there, whatever the case may be. But it's a nonstop road, man. It just, I've got to be out there. I'm not comfortable with just stopping learning. I think and it may sound a little excessive, if you stop growing, you're dead. If you stop growing, you're going to die. You got to keep growing and moving and training and stuff. They want to see you training. Enthusiasts out there. They want to see training evangelists out there.
Yep. Preaching
the word of training all day. So you got to be part of that. You can't get caught behind the office while your other staff are doing that. You got to be out there. One thing we're proud of is when we're having a new recruit class, for example, we will preach to them that we will never have you do something that we will not ourselves do. And we are out there in full gear, bunker gear, flipping ladders, and so on and so forth, because we want them to know that we're not going to follow them around in a golf cart. We're going to do that with them. So when we get back on the streets, they can count on us and vice versa.
Yeah.
Be out there.
I think it's a great point, and one that it's very hard. In my role, which is more administrative, it's very easy to get settled into the chair, and the chair kind of sucks you in. And
sure.
I have to work really hard to remember to get out of the office sometime and participate in drills and stuff. And I think firefighters specifically really love to see their bosses doing hands-on and doing the stuff that they do. And I think they understand that the bosses can't do it every day. But if you follow the internet and all the blogs and Facebook posts and Twitters and stuff like that, look how often and how many likes and great comments are posted when a fire chief of a major metropolitan city, for example, goes down to the academy and participates in basic company drills and puts an air pack on and goes through the maze or goes through the smokehouse or does RIT drills or whatever. I mean, people take pictures of it. They shoot video of it. Sometimes it makes the news. Sometimes the city does a press release about it. And at the end of the day, they're just doing their job. But it has become a rare occurrence that happens. And myself, I have to remind myself constantly to push the chair back and get away from the desk and continue to grow as a firefighter, not just a chief. And I think it's a great point. Aaron or Joe, you want to chime in?
Well,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Aaron. Go ahead.
Well, I've seen it with my chief as well. He's been the fire chief in our district now for 17 years or 18 years, and he could easily be growing those roots. But and there's times where he just can't get out of the damn office because of all the paperwork and everything else. But I watch him try to at least catch some kind of training with each shift throughout the month. And, this week he may be on my platoon. Next week he may stop on B platoon. And just show the men and or staff that, hey, listen, I'm as much of a part of this and I'm bought in just like you are. I just have other responsibilities as well. But yeah, it's absolutely right. If you're the boss and they see you doing it, there's immediate respect, and there's also more confidence in your leadership of them. So I'm a big believer in it.
Yeah, I have one more quick add-on to that. Is it just doesn't relate to the fire chief's office. Battalion chiefs, platoon chiefs, shift commanders, they got to be out there, and they got to be participating in the training. And you're going to gain, that's where the respect is truly gained from the firefighters under your command.
Absolutely. We're at the top of the hour, but I'd really like to try to finish up with the whole top 10. The next one is you have a great platform for communication. Can you hit on that real fast for us, Steve?
Yeah, I'll make it really quick. The fact that you're going to see everybody in your department over the short amount of time, whether it's a year or whatever, in our case, we'll see everybody over, let's say, most 2 years. That's a gift. That's an opportunity. You get to see everybody in your entire department. That's a gift. And how you utilize that gift can make or break you. You can use it positively where you're crushing rumors and getting positive information out there, or you can do it the opposite. But for me, I start every class the same way. That the best thing about being in training is we get to see everybody. We try to use that as best we can, because it is a tremendous, tremendous platform to just spread the love. Absolutely.
Last but not least, I love this term, constant, gentle pressure.
Well, what I'll say about this is our late medical director, Dr. El Sanadi, passed away a few years ago. And one thing he always used to say was constant, gentle pressure. Constant, gentle pressure. To me, that is interpreted as perseverance, keeping going. Listen, sometimes the people upstairs ain't going to like you. There's not going to be the right political people up there to get your point across. You're going to run into roadblocks and hurdles and all this kind of stuff. You gotta keep going. You gotta keep pushing for, like I said before, you gotta be a training evangelist. You gotta keep going and push what you know is right, even though it might not be right at the right time, or there might be barriers. The more you push, I swear to you, I think you guys probably know this, but it's gonna pay dividends. You will get what you need after a while. It may take time, but you will be known as that person who's pushing and been pushing for the right reasons. So, and they have to see you fail and get back up. The people that see you fail and get back up and keep pushing, that's right there another ticket. They need to see that. They need to see the training folk pushing as hard as they can for what they know is right. And that's getting with the health and safety community, getting with R&D, getting involved with the cancer studies that are going on out there, post-traumatic stress, depression, getting involved in pushing the things that we know we need to see out there.
Awesome. Great stuff, Steve. I really obviously enjoyed the article, and I'm glad that Captain Bill Gustin sent it out to his little inner circle of emails, and that's how I first saw it. Again, the article, 10 Things Every New Training Chief Should Know. It's you can find it on fireengineering.com. I think we could probably turn it into 10 separate articles, 10 Humpday Hangouts, and a class. Hint, hint. But I really appreciate Steve coming on and sharing the article with us and talking to us about what he's doing down in Fort Lauderdale in their training division. And I think it excites all of us to hear what they're doing and hear some of his ideas. And I appreciate Joe and Aaron and as always, Chief Halton coming on and being with us. We are at the top of the hour, so unless anybody has anything to add, I just want to thank you for listening in. We'll be back in 2018. So the next time we'll be talking to you will be next year. And we're already working on some plans and some changes for the Humpday Hangout for 2018. More on that later. But again, thank you to Penwell Fire Engineering for having us on. Chief Halton, Aaron, Joe, and Steve, thank you so much for being with us today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Love you guys.